So another thing too. Right now, you have a small dedicated team to what you're doing. How many people are actually involved in this project?
All told?
Yes.
Involved is a complex term.
Well, how about we break it down to scale? You have the core team, and then you have people that would be, I guess, on the outside edges of things. How many would you say are in the core? The people who are really involved.
Well, 3. The 2 Miguels and I.
And then when you say that there's more people, quote unquote, like involved on different levels, how many people would you say there is?
Well, the core team is called the core team because it's the only team responsible for the actual creation of the musical work, meaning of the sets and everything, of the concept. So I'm the composer, arranger, composer, because obviously Mr. Koji Kondo, to whom this is a tribute, and Mr. Toru Minigishi, to whom I wish I knew which were made by which, because they don't tell which tracks were made by who, but apparently it's a team effort. So yes, this is mostly a tribute to Koji Kondo and Toru Minigishi, which I then develop on. So as a composer and the arranger and developer and all that stuff, that's who I am. Miguel came later as the engraver and the advisor in all sorts of things, in some instrumentation, because he has a lot more concept experience than I have. He sings in quiet a lot more as well, so he knows a lot about the human voice. And Liam comes later.
So I'm mostly here to help with matters textual and percussive.
Yes.
So I'm just bringing some experience in instrumentation, specifically percussion, to bear, and I happen to be fairly good at editing English.
Well, he's a walking thesaurus first. That helps a lot with the libretto. He helps me because I'm not a native speaker. I do apparently speak good English, but write good English. Speaking is maybe a bit different. But I'm not a native speaker, and I'm not that experienced in writing for stage yet. So Liam is a very, very good addition, and his help with percussion is invaluable because it's the parts of the orchestra I know the least about, because it's a huge variety of things that can be done. I'm used to very standard ways of composing, of doing instrument. Violins can do this, and then they have specific techniques which are typical of the repertoire and nothing else. Percussion is...
Not for nothing it'll be called the kitchen sink department.
Exactly. They're the kitchen sink of the orchestra. Anything goes. So the core team happens to be the team that is responsible for the actual bringing about of the final form of the score of the work, including my ideas and Liam's ideas for sets and all that stuff. And then what you have is what started as people who were just colleagues and friends and teachers at the academy. I asked, I would like to record something. Would you please help me with this? And we could record this, I don't know, in a week. You could, if you have time to rehearse. It's for a project I'm developing, etc. And most of these people are just literal volunteers. They're just, okay, I'm happy to help. I'll just record you this, and they don't seek anything. They just like the fact that they're recording something. A musician is like a gamer most of the time. Most of them actually like playing for the sake of playing. It's their life. It's what they do. You don't have to pay a gamer to play games. He will play. And in an effort, usually between musicians, there is a solidarity that exists, and people help each other. And then there are people to whom I really wish to thank, and if the opera actually hits the stage properly and it makes a profit, I would like to compensate them, which is the case. So when you talk about everyone else, you have the people who are singing, who happen to be colleagues at the academy, or actually some proper opera singers we happen to find and to contact and to ask if they're interested. And then you have friends of mine who just do the silhouettes that you've seen in the demos. Who just, it's right here in the living room. It's just a bed sheet and a light, nothing else. And then we had for a while, we still have actually, but he doesn't have to do anything else for the demos, which is Aaron Klein, who did beautiful animations for the Deku Palace, the Giant, and he did special effects for Majora's aria. He was a visual effect. He was the closest that could be to the core team, basically, because we were bouncing ideas back and forth. He is one of the people I would really, really like to thank if this actually gets to stage. Because the most sought out videos happen to be the ones that have effects. Majora's Aria, Giants, and Deku Palace, and all that stuff. And then you have... What do you have? You have small people who never appear, who make little props that you see in the shadows. We're all in this effort knowing that if this goes nowhere, no one gets anything. If this goes somewhere, I would like to actually compensate people who've helped me. And the same will go, as I've said to all the concept artists that already mailed me. I've told them the same thing. We're gonna compile a huge Bible of sorts, a single tome with a score and the illustrations and the costumes and the sets, and this will be the work itself. If the work actually hits the stage, we all see money. Well, hopefully. Hopefully. If it doesn't, then it doesn't. It just stops.
Well, this has been in the works for a long time now. You know, since you said 2011 really has been when it started and all that stuff, and then it started to snowball and get bigger and bigger and bigger. What is like the next step, the next phase of your creation, as well as getting it actually approved by Nintendo?
Well, the phase we're currently in is finishing off the revision of the libretto and orchestration, and once we've done that, all that principally remains is to engrave the score. The other thing that we're going to try and do is, once we've got the illustrations and some supplementary notes written up, is to compile that into a single reference for staging. There's no other way to characterize it. It's a Bible, basically. It is a mountainous tome consisting of exhaustive directions for within a reasonable amount of detail every aspect of the staging, from musical direction to set design to
as a reference.
As a reference. And once that's done, then we could say in some sense the work exists. It is complete. It is something that could be taken by a production team, by a theatre, and it could be presented. It could be rehearsed. It could be
staged.
It could be staged. Staging would be conceivable at that point. To get to that stage, or to cross that barrier, at that point we would then need to seek the approval of Nintendo.
Which is something that is likely as it is unlikely. I literally have no idea, but seeing as some efforts who started independent became supported or at least acknowledged, I'm not too discouraged. Because I have a feeling, at least from what I've seen, that Nintendo likes quality first, and they don't mind most things that aren't in their own environment. So, you know, if you make a fan game of a game, Nintendo might just, shut it down. But there's so much stuff around that happens to start as independent things that, well, the only example of that actually was extremely successful was Zelda Symphony Orchestra.
Yes.
Zelda, yes. Which did start, I think, as an independent thing, which then Nintendo liked and, approved for the 25th anniversary. I think that would be the major barrier to it, because the moment Nintendo says, okay, you can do that, we don't mind, then there are no barriers whatsoever. The only obstacle from that moment on would be time, and staging a work, as you said in the Q&A. Yes,
it is a fairly time-consuming process for premieres, particularly. If you have an established work, it has the advantage of having a precedent and having a reputation. There are people who have already performed the work who know how it should be done. If you are staging something for the first time, people tend to regard it with some consternation, because there's no certainty. It's never been performed before. They don't know. Large companies don't know how an audience reacts to the work. They don't know if it's worth investing in. It's a risk to them, yes. a calculated risk.
Yes, and the larger the production, the harder
yes.
it is, and this is quite large.
It's not as large as they come, but it is not small.
No, yeah.
Mm-hmm. So if you did make it to the staging phase, and you have that all set up, and you got, you know, people to see and all that stuff, how do you feel about recording it and having it distributed in theaters around the world, or having it posted online? It's not the same, personally, in my opinion, you know, to be at a physical location and to witness an event and to witness a symphony than it is to witness it outside of it in said locations. How do you feel about sourcing the material outward like that around the world?
Well, I don't think it's necessarily something to obstruct. I mean, you're quite right, it's not the same as physically being at a performance, but if you want to be physically at a performance, you would seek a means to do that if that mattered that much to you. I don't see that it would be. I mean, other than if Nintendo posed an objection, which they may not. I don't see that we'd want to prevent that. I don't see that there's a reason to do that.
Personally, I have no qualms with a well-filmed production, and those exist, and they're great, either on screen or in front of you. Of course, in front of you, you have the advantage of being there, and some effects work best, you know, on stage when viewed from the audience. But I have no objections to it whatsoever. The thing is, the online distribution is a complex concept, because if we are building a production that requires funds, a complete version of it freely online would undermine those efforts.
Well, it competes against oneself.
Exactly, but in any other way, I mean, to be bought DVDs, Blu-rays, or whatever. Sure, I don't see a problem with that, as long, of course, as it is well filmed. And usually, when they film productions officially, they do a good job of it. So, it's fine.
So on this type of project, have you? I know it might, you know, probably be too early to ask this, but like, have you thought about like what a budget would be to actually make this?
Do you have any idea? I don't know. Do you know?
I have like estimates for some productions. I can safely say it's 5 figures is a small production. I'll put it to you that way. 5 figures is a very small production, and we would probably be not a small production. It's the total production budget for a stage work, particularly one with a run of any duration, can be quite dramatic. Opera more so. The comparison that, say, Americans might find particularly salient would be Broadway. Broadway productions are usually some slightly smaller scale than opera. I mean, you can do opera on a very small scale, but traditionally that is not the case. Broadway, a lot of the conventions of Broadway tend to lend themselves to being done not cheaply but economically. They're not known for largesse. They are not absolutely colossal. Opera is not something that scales down well, ever.
Especially Majora's Mask, because, yes, something I stress all the time is that if the resources assembled to build this, to make this staged, are short of the, I wouldn't say the ideal, but are if suddenly they make the work very small or very limited in resources, I would rather not stage it at all, because Majora tends to. It's a story about something big. I don't just mean the moon. I mean it's
something that does not survive particularly dramatic compromise.
Yes, exactly. It would need proper physical sets. It would need a proper presentation, and it's not made of cardboard flat things. You know, is what I mean. It needs.
We're staring down the prospect of actually requiring 7 percussionists. full-scale symphony orchestras typically have maybe 4 to 5.
Yeah, but
This is a pit.
Now you're talking about the number of people in the orchestra. Yeah, that's something
That's its own terrifying prospect.
It's not that big. I just have some parts which cannot be done without a lot of people in the percussion department and other things. But because in the other aspects, I think I'm pretty fine. Because, you know, if you compare to Wagner with his...
Yes, we can take solace in not being Herr Wagner.
Ooh, I think we clipped there.
Oh, did we clip?
Yes.
Whoopsie.
Yes.
Sorry.
I could hear the clip.
Sorry. Okay. Yes.
No, that's fine.
Yes.
I do not need to listen to anything anymore.
Yes. We can take some solace in not being Herr Wagner. What with his what's some oddities? His multiple sets of tuned anvils and the like. Although we're doing something nearly as bad.
No, that's the benchophone. That's the one for the Cafe's Dream. We still don't know how's that going to work. Actually, it might actually be the oil drums. You know, with water.
A combination. Yeah, a combination of that with basically steel. Hit it with things.
Yes.
Hit all the things.
Yes. Well,
It could be a kitchen sink.
No, it couldn't.
Of course, it could.
Too high. The pitch is too high.
A very large kitchen sink.
An industrial oven. The point is usually actually the problem usually relies on the space inside the orchestra pit. You know, the orchestra that goes below the stage and a bit out of it. That's usually where most of the problems happen because you need to fit all those people in the pit.
A typical Broadway orchestra usually fills a pit, and that's usually about 26 people-ish. At a stretch.
Yeah, at a stretch. 26 people is less than the amount of strings I have. Not counting the woodwinds, the brass, the percussion, etc., etc., etc. So, no. Need something a bit bigger. But yes, that obviously works against our favor, but I thought that making Majora's Mask with a small orchestra, would not lend its story the grandeur it needs. So in simple terms, I need noise.
Much of.
But yes, sorry, there was something else to your question. You said once it's staged. Sorry.
Let's see. I can't remember this moment. Let's see. Once it's staged, I honestly don't remember. That was too long ago now.
No, wait.
That was prior to the clipping, so I just lost it when that happened.
There was a point I wanted to make. Let me see. Once it is staged, what would be?
Once it is staged, people pay money and buy tickets and go to see a very good show, and they remember it and they talk about it for years, and they're like, who is this man who wrote this thing that will be remembered? And then you'll appear in textbooks, and then students in a few centuries will start studying the way you write opera, and then they'll forget how it was written before, and you will be responsible for corrupting the entire Western operatic tradition. Do you want that on your shoulders?
Anything about corrupting, I do want on my shoulders very much. What was? Yeah, okay, that was a point. I forgot the point. The point being, if it is not staged with proper resources, I would rather not stage it.
Makes sense to me. I mean, you don't want to cut corners. You don't want to have a loss of quality. You got to stick to your principles about what would be true to it.
And I do like cutting corners. In fact, what I'm doing now is cutting corners in various areas. I do like cutting corners when it's intelligent and the result is good. But most of the things that happen in some parts of the opera simply cannot be cut. It just doesn't.
Mm-hmm. Right. You're doing everything with a certain amount of precision and effort, that this is going to be a certain high quality that everyone else can look to. That's what I think that what a lot of people are excited for in this project, is that there is a high level of effort put into this.
Yes.
So I have two questions. First one is, does this project have, or will it have, like, an official name when you go to see it? Like, what would be on the leaflets and you say, oh, I'm going to see this? What do you tell people? And then the second question, you know what? I'll just ask it afterwards. What is the project?
It's Majora. It's never had another name.
Like it's just, so when it comes out, it would just be Majora.
Yes.
Yes.
Okay, just making sure.
No, that's it.
I never thought that was just clear for myself. And then also, since it is called Majora, what is the role or the level of role that when people go to see Majora, that Majora's mask and Majora and all that stuff actually plays in to the play? Well, not play,
Highly significant. Highly significant.
Well, significant for the obvious reasons.
Well,
But
aside from the overhanging obvious ones.
aside,
Well, musically, when she appears, she's a coloratura. She takes center stage.
yeah, okay. Now, musically speaking, as a singer, she is a role that is needs to be very agile and very technically proficient, and basically she goes very high very quickly. That's the layman's terms. But you mean in terms of character, right? Let's see. What to reveal, what not to reveal. Now,
I would say we wouldn't say she has equal stage time with Cafe.
no, she doesn't actually. I can safely say. Well, first I have to talk about how Majora and Skullkid work. As you might have noticed from Majora's aria, the demo, Skullkid dances, Majora sings. Now, how does that work exactly? The idea is that Majora, the singer, the person on stage who will be there singing, is something in Skullkid's mind, or rather, it's what inhabits the mask. So it's basically what Skullkid is hearing in his head. Then, how do I explain this? Skullkid. Well, the first reason of all why I didn't have Skullkid sing is because he has the mask in front of his face. That's pretty simple. And I didn't want to have to cut holes in the mask for the mouth or anything like that. It's stupid. It doesn't make any sense. The mask itself is a beautiful artifact on its own. It deserves to be shown as it is. So the fact that he's a dancer actually helps convey the idea that he is not in control of himself. He does not talk. Majora is the one who talks. Majora is the one who puppets him, basically. She's a puppeteer in a way.
Yes.
But the thing is, when it is meant to be vague in a way that sometimes Skullkid interacts with characters, but the person who's talking is Majora. So the dancer is mimicking, is in sync with the singer in a way that the dancer is actually the physical, what the people of Terminus see in front of them, the physical creature.
They're arguably not distinct entities.
Yeah, exactly. They are distinct entities in the sense that Majora is possessing Skullkid, but for the ordinary Terminian, whatever you want to call them, Skullkid is the only thing they see is Skullkid, and the voice that talks to them sometimes is Skullkid's. And we could argue, that Skullkid and Majora are effectively sharing. I can hear your keyboard. That Skullkid and Majora are effectively sharing a body at that moment. So it's like two consciences in one, but the only one that talks, or the only one that actually controls what's going on is Majora. Now, in terms of how relevant the character is, aside from the impending moon, well, she does have effects on characters.
Yes.
Obviously.
Quite directly.
Quite directly, actually. She does get in the way of specific characters. But the idea is that the way I see Majora is an entity of pure chaos, pure evil, in the sense that it has no notion of... Playtime is never over. How would you develop that?
She's no notion of responsibility, of empathy, of... She's essentially perfect. She's not naive. She is perfectly... she's perfectly infantile in many respects. She has no concept other than her own gratification, which is all of the time.
It's a sort of... It goes into a sort of psychological sort of thing, in the sense that a child first develops a sense of self, and then takes a while to develop a sense of the others and all that stuff. And I was inspired by the article of an article by Hilly and Dan. Two of them actually, but the one that for this specific case, the Immortal Childhood, where he compares the villains of Zelda, including Ganondorf, as people who refuse to let time take its course, or to refuse to let go of things. And that's a very infantile behavior, very childish behavior. So Majora functions as a perversion of a child, meaning a child that refuses to grow up. A child that, in refusing to grow up, will distort the entire world around her, because contrarily to a normal child, Majora has immense powers. So it's throwing the moon at the world is the ultimate tantrum. The idea is that because Majora and Skullkid share the same body, Majora is currently feeding the pain of Skullkid. And the pain of Skullkid is, my friends, the giants, left me. I was left all alone. Why did they have to leave me? We know they left to create Termina. They left to guard the four corners of the world, and that's how the four corners of the world began. So, in effect, Majora hates the world and hates time, because she hates that, or rather, because she's possessing Skullkid and she's feeding off Skullkid's wounds, she is fueling his own hatred and acquiring it to herself, for herself. And therefore representing, how I say it, she is representing the world. She is acting upon the world as Skullkid sees it, as a very nasty, menacing thing that would better be just crushed, because it's mean. I don't want this. I want this to end because she's. It
was born out of his despair.
Exactly, it was born out of his despair. She is envious. She's jealous of the entirety of Termina. The way I say she in the sense of it, she because of the singer. Majora is completely in my mind is genderless, a genderless entity. I just thought a soprano would be good for the role. That's all. But Majora itself has no bearing whatsoever. Meaning, the actual entity in the mask is nothing but a collection of insanity, of negative things.
She has no drive, no purpose as such.
Because she has no purpose, that's where I tie back to the beginning of what I was saying before. Because she has no purpose, her interactions with anyone are purely for the satisfaction of sadistic urges. There's nothing else. It's fun. I'm gonna see what happens here, because she has so much more power than everyone else. You know, a flick of the mask, a shaking of the mask turns Link into a Deku Scrub, right? So a flicker of the mask can summon a snowstorm, can pull the moon down, can do anything. So they're all toys for her. And there's an important thing that actually I can talk about now, which I will talk about in the Q&A if someone asks. But it's an interesting idea, which is the reason the giants, when Link kills the bosses, the reason they're masks. The way I see it is the roles that Skullkid attributed to his friends, who he thinks are no longer his friends. The giants, you know, they left him. They're not my friends. They're monsters. So it's a sort of a literal. Majora made that literal. Majora literally turned the entities at the four corners of the world into monsters. So it's a warping of the world around the mind of a child that does not understand what responsibility is and what duty is. So it just fits Majora perfectly. Skullkid just wanted to be scary. He just tricked the heavy mask salesman. He knocked him out, stole Majora's mask, and he just called out to him, maybe because they had something in common. But that's absolutely irrelevant to the opera. What's important is that Skullkid acts as a source of chaos. And Skullkid and Majora, I mean, act as a source of chaos. And that is basically their role in the opera. They serve as the... I wouldn't call it a MacGuffin, because that's technically Kafe's sun mask. It's a universal antagonist. There is no leading purpose other than perhaps the fact that the giants were too cruel, not cruel, too
Possibly
Too harsh.
judged too harshly.
Yes, possibly because Giants judged Skullkid too harshly. He ended up, you know, resenting them. It's the whole game of making things a bit vague in the sense that, you know, Skullkid, he's not to blame. You know, he doesn't understand his guilt. He is remorse. He's not remorse. Sorry, he is filled with
bitterness.
With bitterness, and he just happened to find something that is inherently evil that would just amplify that bitterness. Majora itself has no body of its own. There's nothing there. It needs something to latch on, and the moment you grab. You let something, if you let something, some bitter part of you take over, things can go to shit pretty quickly. That's basically what Majora embodies. It's the lack of control and the urge to follow every single bitter little qualm, remorse, every petty dispute, every small thing that you don't like, you know, I will crush you over this because I don't like you because you did this to me and you're mean. Like the giant say, forgive our friends. There is no notion of forgiveness. Majora can't even understand what someone else is, let alone what forgiveness is. So that's basically it.
Wow. That was pretty good. That's whole, you know, perfect explanation, I think, of that whole scenario.
Lasvegas spells Vegas, a town where you are sure to have a ball. A city that's as cool as it is hot. That's Vegas. Place a bet and you can win it all. Lasvegas spells Vegas, a place where you can party all night long.